Most people believe the truth hides behind locked doors. They're wrong. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the one person nobody bothers to notice. At exactly 11:43 p.m., Ethan Walker pushed his maintenance cart through the silent lobby of Ashcroft Financial Tower, the polished marble floors reflecting the cold glow of fluorescent lights that never seemed to sleep. Every evening looked the same. Every hallway echoed with the steady hum of ventilation fans, distant elevators, and the quiet rhythm of a building that made billions of dollars while pretending the night belonged to no one. Ethan had learned long ago that invisible people noticed everything. As a single father raising his 11-year-old daughter, Lily, every overnight shift meant another chance to keep food on the table, another chance to make next month's rent, another promise kept. He wasn't chasing promotions or recognition. He was chasing stability. The kind of stability a little girl deserved after losing her mother years earlier. His coworkers joked that Ethan could repair anything with enough patience. They also joked that he was too quiet for a city that rewarded loud voices. Ethan never argued. Silence had become his greatest habit and maybe his greatest strength. He checked the maintenance log, replaced a faulty emergency light on the 34th floor, reset a stubborn climate control panel on 36, then headed toward the restricted mechanical level where only authorized personnel and overnight maintenance crews ever traveled. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a corridor washed in pale white light. It smelled faintly of machine oil, fresh paint, and expensive air filtration systems. Nothing looked unusual. Nothing sounded unusual. Until it did. Somewhere beyond the reinforced server room doors, voices rose just enough to interrupt the mechanical rhythm of cooling fans. One voice sounded calm. Another sounded impatient. Ethan couldn't make out the words. Only fragments carried through the ventilation ducts. It has to disappear tonight. A pause. No mistakes. Then silence returned so suddenly it felt unnatural, as though the building itself had taken a careful breath. Ethan stood still for only a second before reminding himself that conversations inside executive areas were none of his business. He adjusted the toolbox in his hand and continued toward an electrical junction panel that had been reporting intermittent voltage fluctuations since the previous evening. Work first. Curiosity never paid the bills. As he unlocked the maintenance cabinet, every light in the corridor flickered once, then twice. The backup system activated automatically with a muted click. Ethan frowned. That wasn't supposed to happen. According to the building schematics, this section had redundant power capable of preventing even the smallest interruption. He opened the panel and inspected the breakers. Everything appeared normal. Too normal. Years of repairing complicated systems had taught him one lesson. When expensive equipment behaved perfectly after failing, someone had usually forced it to. He closed the panel and glanced down the hallway. The heavy server room door stood slightly open, less than an inch, something he had never seen before. Company policy required it to remain sealed at all times. Before he could decide whether to report it, hurried footsteps echoed from somewhere beyond the doorway. They moved quickly, then stopped. A moment later, another set of footsteps headed in the opposite direction. Ethan instinctively stepped behind a utility cart as the corridor fell silent once again. The air seemed colder now, filled only with the steady whisper of thousands of cooling fans protecting oceans of financial data hidden behind reinforced walls. Nearly 30 seconds passed before he heard the soft ding of an elevator arriving at the far end of the hall. Whoever had been inside was gone. Ethan waited another moment before walking toward the server room entrance, intending only to close the door and notify security. That was all. Nothing more. As he reached for the handle, something caught his eye. Resting beside a floor drain was a black external hard drive no larger than the palm of his hand. No company label. No inventory sticker. Just a plain matte surface reflecting the overhead lights. It looked strangely out of place, like something that had been dropped in a hurry. Ethan bent down, picked it up carefully, and turned it over. There were no markings except for a tiny silver number etched into one corner. Before he could read it, every light in the hallway brightened at once. Somewhere above him, security cameras quietly rotated toward the corridor. Ethan looked up without realizing that, at that exact moment, dozens of digital eyes had captured the image of a maintenance worker standing alone outside the most secure room in the building, holding the one object powerful enough to unravel a billion-dollar crime. By sunrise, the entire city would be searching for the wrong man. Ethan Walker did not notice the security camera following his every step as he slipped the small black drive into the front pocket of his worn maintenance jacket. His first instinct was not fear. It was responsibility. If someone had misplaced company property inside a restricted area, he would turn it in before the end of his shift, just as he had done with forgotten access cards, expensive watches, laptops, and even envelopes filled with cash over the past 8 years. That was simply who he was. The elevator carried him quietly back to the lower mechanical floors while the city beyond the glass walls shimmered beneath thousands of lights. Somewhere across town, his daughter Lily was sleeping peacefully at the apartment of Mrs. Henderson, the retired schoolteacher who watched her whenever Ethan worked overnight. Every morning before school, Ethan picked Lily up at 6:30, drove her home, made blueberry pancakes whenever he could afford fresh berries, and never complained about how little sleep remained for himself. Those ordinary moments mattered more than anything inside Ashcroft Financial Tower. His life had become a collection of promises made after his wife passed away. Never miss a parent-teacher conference. Never forget a birthday. Never let Lily believe she was carrying the weight of their loss alone. Every extra shift, every aching muscle, every long night beneath fluorescent lights existed for one reason. She deserved a childhood that still felt safe. Just after midnight, Ethan reached the maintenance office and signed the routine inspection log. His supervisor had already gone home, leaving only a handwritten note reminding the overnight crew to finish replacing emergency exit batteries before sunrise. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary, yet something inside Ethan refused to settle. He removed the black drive from his pocket and studied it again beneath the desk lamp. It carried no serial number registered in the building inventory database. No manufacturer logo. No identification beyond the tiny silver engraving he had noticed upstairs. 7 digits. Nothing more. Strange. Very strange. He considered calling building security immediately, but another thought interrupted him. If the drive belonged to the executives he had overheard, returning it without documentation might simply make it disappear forever. He did not know why that idea bothered him so deeply. Perhaps it was because of the voices. Perhaps it was because secure doors never stood open by accident. Or perhaps it was because years of repairing complex systems had taught him that small mistakes usually revealed much larger ones hidden underneath. Before he could decide what to do, his work phone vibrated sharply across the desk. The display read security operations. Ethan answered immediately. Good evening. This is Ethan Walker in maintenance. The voice on the other end remained polite, but unusually formal. Mr. Walker, could you please report to the security office before ending your shift? We have a few routine questions regarding tonight's maintenance activity on the restricted mechanical level. Routine questions. The words sounded harmless enough, yet something about the carefully measured tone unsettled him. Of course, Ethan replied. I will stop by before I leave. Thank you. The call ended without another word. Ethan slipped the drive back into his jacket, finished replacing 2 emergency batteries, repaired a faulty hallway sensor, and continued working exactly as he always had. Calm hands, careful steps, quiet determination. Still, he could not shake the feeling that the building itself had changed. Employees leaving late suddenly glanced at him a second. Longer than usual. A pair of security officers walked past without offering their customary greeting. Even the cameras seemed more noticeable now, turning almost silently above every intersection. At 4:48 in the morning, Ethan pushed his cart toward the employee exit. Dawn had not yet reached the skyline, and the streets remained wrapped in cool gray shadows. He looked forward to seeing Lily, hearing her sleepy voice ask whether there was enough maple syrup for breakfast, pretending for another day that life was simple. As he approached the security office, he noticed 2 unfamiliar black sport utility vehicles parked outside the loading dock entrance. Their engines idled quietly despite the early hour. Men and women wearing dark business attire stepped inside, carrying slim briefcases instead of tool bags or coffee cups. None of them smiled. None of them looked tired. One woman paused for the briefest moment and glanced directly toward Ethan before disappearing behind the security doors. He had never seen her before, but the expression in her eyes was unforgettable. It was not curiosity. It was recognition. And somehow, Before anyone had spoken a single question, she already seemed to know exactly who he was. The woman waited until Ethan stepped inside the security office before introducing herself. She stood beside a conference table with a leather folder tucked beneath one arm, dressed in a charcoal suit that carried authority without demanding attention. Her blonde hair was tied neatly behind her head, and her calm blue eyes studied Ethan with quiet precision. "Good morning, Mr. Walker," she said. "My name is Olivia Brooks." She did not offer a company title. She did not offer a handshake. She simply observed him for a moment, as though comparing the man standing before her with a picture already formed in her mind. Ethan nodded politely. "You wanted to ask me about my maintenance rounds?" Olivia glanced toward the two security managers seated across the room. Neither of them spoke. One merely slid a printed floor map across the table. "Would you walk us through your movements between 11:30 and midnight?" Ethan looked at the map. Without hesitation, he pointed to each mechanical room, each electrical panel, each inspection stop exactly as he remembered them. Years of maintenance work had trained his memory to follow circuits like roads across a city. He missed nothing. When he finished, the room fell quiet. One security manager folded his hands. "Did you notice anything unusual?" Ethan paused. He remembered the voices. The open server room door. The unexpected power fluctuation. The black drive resting beside the floor drain. His instinct told him to answer carefully. "The backup lights activated for a few seconds," he said truthfully. "That should not have happened." Olivia watched him closely. "Anything else?" Ethan slowly shook his head. "Nothing I could explain." Olivia did not look disappointed. Instead, she seemed almost relieved. She closed the folder without opening it. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Walker. You are free to leave." Ethan offered a courteous nod and walked out of the office carrying more questions than answers. The moment the elevator doors closed behind him, Olivia opened the folder at last. Inside rested a single surveillance photograph captured only hours earlier. It showed Ethan standing outside the restricted server room, holding the small black drive. She stared at the image for several seconds before quietly saying, "He does not even know what he has." Outside, dawn finally reached the city. Ethan drove through familiar streets toward Mrs. Henderson's house, while morning commuters filled the highways. He forced himself to focus on ordinary thoughts. Pancakes. Lily's math quiz. The leaking kitchen faucet he still had not repaired. Normal life felt comforting after a long night inside a building that suddenly no longer felt ordinary. Lily greeted him at the front door with a sleepy smile and wrapped both arms around his waist. "Did you work too hard again, Daddy?" she asked. Ethan smiled gently. "Just another night." She laughed. "You always say that." During breakfast, Lily talked excitedly about the science fair and the birdhouse she wanted to build for school. Ethan listened carefully, encouraging every idea while quietly hiding the exhaustion. Beneath his eyes, children deserved parents who listened before they lectured. It was one promise he never intended to break. After dropping Lily at school, Ethan finally returned to the apartment. The silence inside felt different from the peaceful quiet he usually welcomed. His eyes drifted toward the maintenance jacket hanging over the kitchen chair. The black drive remained inside the pocket. He removed it once more and turned it slowly beneath the morning sunlight pouring through the window. 7 tiny, engraved numbers. Nothing else. His old laptop rested on the dining table beside unpaid utility bills and Lily's colored pencils. Ethan hesitated. Company policy clearly prohibited connecting unidentified storage devices to personal computers. Common sense agreed. Yet another thought refused to leave him. What if someone had intentionally hidden this drive because it contained evidence rather than ordinary files? What if returning it meant ensuring no one would ever see what was inside? He poured himself another cup of coffee that had already grown lukewarm. The apartment remained perfectly still except for the ticking wall clock and the distant sound of children playing outside the school across the street. Ethan reached for an old external adapter stored inside a desk drawer, one he normally used to recover family photographs from damaged hard drives. His hand stopped inches away. Just enough to identify the owner, he quietly told himself. Nothing more. He connected the adapter, pressed the power button on the laptop, and waited as the familiar startup screen faded into view. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then a single encrypted directory appeared without a file name, followed almost instantly by hundreds of folders that seemed to unlock themselves one after another. Numbers filled the screen. Bank transfers, offshore accounts, shell companies, internal approvals carrying executive signatures. The total values climbed higher with every page until the final figure appeared near the bottom of the display. $1 billion for $112 million. Ethan stared without blinking. Before he could process what he was seeing, a new notification flashed across the monitor in bright red letters. Remote access detected. The warning remained on Ethan's screen for only 3 seconds before every folder disappeared, as if someone had swept an entire library off the shelves. The laptop returned to an ordinary desktop background, leaving behind only the blinking cursor and the echo of one impossible message. Remote access detected. Ethan sat perfectly still. His heart did not race. His breathing did not change. Years of raising Lily alone had taught him that panic rarely solved anything. He quietly disconnected the black drive, removed the adapter, and placed both inside an old metal toolbox beneath the kitchen sink. Then he unplugged the laptop from the wall. Outside his apartment window, children laughed on the playground across the street, school buses rolled through the neighborhood, and sprinklers watered small front lawns beneath the warm morning sun. The ordinary world continued without the slightest idea that somewhere inside one small apartment rested information capable of destroying careers, fortunes, and perhaps entire companies. Ethan looked at the family photograph on the refrigerator. Lily stood beside him holding the blue ribbon she had won at the county science fair the previous spring. Her smile reminded him of exactly what mattered. Whatever happened next, his first responsibility was protecting her. He picked up his phone and called Mrs. Henderson. "Would it be all right if Lily stayed with you after school today?" he asked. "I may have to work later than expected." Mrs. Henderson laughed warmly. "She is always welcome here." "You sound tired, Ethan." "Just a long shift." "Then I will make her favorite macaroni and cheese." Ethan thanked her before ending the call. He hated changing Lily's routine, but something deep inside him insisted that caution was wiser than convenience. Around noon, he drove back toward Ashcroft Financial Tower for another scheduled maintenance briefing. The downtown streets buzzed with lunchtime traffic, construction crews, delivery trucks, and office workers balancing coffee cups while checking their phones. Everything appeared perfectly normal until he noticed the same black sport utility vehicle from earlier that morning parked across from the employee entrance. Its windows were dark enough to hide whoever sat inside. Ethan drove past without slowing down. Maybe it belonged to a visiting executive. Maybe not. Inside the building, familiar sounds greeted him. Elevator bells chimed. Printers hummed. Conversations drifted across polished hallways. Yet the atmosphere felt subtly different. Several co-workers lowered their voices when he approached. One maintenance technician offered an uneasy smile before quickly returning to his work order. Even Ethan's supervisor, Carl Benson, seemed distracted. "Walker," Carl said, avoiding eye contact. "Security wants every maintenance employee to review surveillance procedures this afternoon." "New policy." Ethan nodded. "Any reason?" Carl shrugged. "They did not tell me." During the meeting, security managers explained updated reporting requirements, restricted access reminders, and equipment accountability. Their words sounded routine, but one sentence caught Ethan's attention. If any employee discovers unregistered electronic devices anywhere in the building, they must report them immediately without examining their contents. Several workers exchanged puzzled glances. Ethan remained expressionless. He simply wrote the instruction into his notebook like everyone else. After the meeting ended, he returned to replacing ceiling sensors on the 22nd floor. While standing on a ladder, he happened to glance through the glass wall overlooking the executive parking structure below. The same black sport utility vehicle remained there. This time its engine was running. A woman stepped out carrying a leather folder. Ethan recognized her immediately. Olivia Brooks. She spoke briefly with a gray-haired executive Ethan had seen only once before during the company's annual holiday banquet. The executive handed Olivia a sealed envelope. She accepted it without smiling. As they walked in opposite directions, Olivia suddenly stopped and looked upward. Through 2 stories of glass, her eyes met Ethan's for the briefest instant. She did not wave. She did not signal. She simply held his gaze with an expression that seemed less suspicious than concerned. Then she continued walking. Ethan climbed down from the ladder slowly. Something about that moment unsettled him more than the encrypted files ever had. Late that afternoon, As he prepared to leave and pick up Lily, his phone vibrated with an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Instead, he answered. A calm female voice spoke quietly. "Mr. Walker, do not return home yet. Someone is already waiting there." Before Ethan could ask a single question, the call disconnected. Ethan lowered the phone slowly, staring through the windshield as the afternoon traffic rolled past without urgency. The voice had been calm, controlled, and strangely familiar. He had heard it only once before inside the security office. Olivia Brooks. She had not introduced herself this time, but she did not need to. Ethan started the engine again and pulled away from the employee parking lot without heading toward his apartment. Instead, he drove to the elementary school and parked across the street, arriving nearly 40 minutes before dismissal. He preferred waiting where he could see Lily rather than wondering whether someone else might be watching her. Parents gradually filled the sidewalk carrying coffee cups and backpacks, while teachers escorted younger students toward the front entrance. Everything looked peaceful. Children laughed. Crossing guards waved traffic forward. The ordinary rhythm of family life softened the tension that had followed Ethan since the previous night. Then a dark sedan rolled slowly past the school, circled the block once, and continued without stopping. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was only another parent looking for parking. Still, Ethan quietly made note of the license plate before looking back toward the school doors. At exactly 3:15, Lily came running toward him with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders and a cardboard model of a birdhouse carefully balanced in both hands. "Daddy, look," she said with a bright smile. "Mrs. Grant says mine might win first place." Ethan smiled warmly. "I believe her." She climbed into the truck and immediately began explaining how. She wanted to paint tiny blue flowers around the roof. Ethan listened to every word. He asked questions. He laughed at her stories. If anyone had been watching them, they would have seen only an ordinary father enjoying an ordinary afternoon with his daughter. That was exactly how Ethan wanted it. Instead of driving home, he stopped at Mrs. Henderson's house. Lily looked confused. "I thought we were making pancakes for dinner." Ethan forced a gentle smile. "Rain check. Mrs. Henderson has macaroni and cheese waiting for you." Lily pretended to sigh dramatically before hugging him. "Okay, but tomorrow you owe me pancakes." "Tomorrow," Ethan promised. "I will even make extra." He waited until she disappeared safely inside before returning to his truck. The quiet felt heavier now. He checked every mirror before pulling away from the curb. 10 minutes later, as he drove through a small public park lined with maple trees, another vehicle eased in behind him. It kept a steady distance through 3 consecutive turns. Ethan did not speed up. He did not panic. He simply continued driving until he reached a crowded grocery store parking lot. The vehicle slowed, then continued straight without entering. Coincidence, he told himself. Maybe. A few moments later, his phone rang again. This time the caller identification displayed a local number. "Mr. Walker," Olivia said. "Please do not hang up." Ethan remained silent. "You warned me not to go home," he finally replied. "Why?" "Because I believed someone was searching for the drive." Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "You know about it." "I know enough to understand you are in danger without realizing why." Ethan parked beneath a large oak tree overlooking the edge of the lot. "Who are you?" There was a brief pause before Olivia answered. "I work with the Federal Financial Crimes Task Force. My assignment began as an investigation into suspicious international transfers. Last night, everything changed." Ethan looked through the windshield at families loading groceries into their cars. "Then why did you question me like I was guilty?" Olivia answered honestly. "Because every piece of evidence pointed toward you. Every security recording placed you outside the restricted server room. Every digital access log showed your employee badge in the right place at the right time. Until this afternoon, I believed you had taken the drive intentionally." Ethan looked down at his calloused hands resting on the steering wheel. "I found it beside a floor drain. I was planning to report it." Olivia spoke more softly now. "That is exactly what I hoped you would say." Silence settled between them for several seconds. The breeze stirred the leaves overhead, while distant children laughed on a nearby playground. Finally, Ethan asked the question that had been growing inside him since the previous night. "What was on that drive?" Olivia did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice carried none of the confidence it had inside the security office. Enough evidence to expose people whose influence reaches far beyond one company. If they believe you still have access to those files, they will never stop looking. Ethan glanced toward the passenger seat where his old maintenance toolbox rested quietly beneath a folded work jacket. Hidden inside, untouched since morning, lay the small black drive. Before he could respond, Olivia spoke one final sentence that made the world feel suddenly much smaller. Mr. Walker, someone inside the investigation is leaking information, and I no longer know who I can trust besides you. Olivia gave Ethan an address on the edge of the city, an old public library that had been converted into a municipal records archive years earlier. Meet me there in 1 hour, she said quietly. Do not drive directly from where you are. Make 2 unnecessary turns. If anyone follows you, keep going. The line disconnected before Ethan could ask another question. He remained parked beneath the oak tree for another minute, thinking not about the encrypted files or the billions of dollars hidden behind anonymous accounts, but about Lily finishing her macaroni and cheese at Mrs. Henderson's kitchen table. He had spent years teaching his daughter that honesty was always simpler than deception. Now he was driving through downtown deliberately, trying not to be followed. The contradiction weighed heavily on him. He circled 3 different neighborhoods, stopped at a gas station long enough to buy a bottle of water, then crossed the river before finally arriving at the quiet brick building Olivia had chosen. The parking lot held only a handful of vehicles. Inside, rows of old government records stretched beneath warm reading lamps, filling the room with the comforting scent of paper, polished wood, and history. Olivia sat alone at a large oak table surrounded by stacks of archived property records. She looked less like an investigator today and more like an exhausted professional who had not slept in far too many nights. When Ethan approached, she stood immediately. Thank you for coming. Ethan placed the metal toolbox gently on the table, but kept one hand resting on it. You said you trust me. I still do not know why. Olivia met his eyes without hesitation. Because guilty people protect themselves first. You protected your daughter. Neither of them spoke for several moments. The quiet between them carried more honesty than hurried explanations ever could. Finally, Olivia opened a slim folder filled with photographs, financial charts, and copies of international transfer records. Ashcroft Financial is only one piece, she explained. The money moved through construction firms, charitable foundations, technology vendors, and offshore partnerships. Every transaction looked legal by itself. Together, they formed a network worth more than $1 billion. Ethan studied the documents carefully. Many pages carried approval signatures from executives whose faces decorated magazine covers and business conferences across the country. Why would someone keep all of this on one drive? He asked. Olivia answered softly. Insurance. Whoever created that archive wanted leverage if the organization ever turned against them. Ethan slowly opened the toolbox and removed the black drive. Olivia looked at it without reaching forward. May I? She asked. Ethan nodded once. She connected it to a secure government laptop she had brought with her, but this time she inserted a small encrypted device between the computer and the drive. Before pressing the power button, if someone attempts remote access again, this firewall should isolate the connection. Seconds passed. The encrypted directory appeared exactly as before. This time the files remained visible. Olivia carefully opened transaction logs, internal memorandums, executive calendars, and encrypted communications. Each document expanded the picture. Shell corporations owned other shell corporations. Charitable donations quietly became consulting fees. Property purchases concealed international transfers. Every layer revealed another hidden layer beneath it. Ethan watched silently. He understood electrical systems better than financial ones. Yet even he recognized a pattern designed with extraordinary precision. Olivia suddenly stopped scrolling. One file contained a list of future payment dates that had not yet occurred. The next transfer was scheduled for the following evening. They are still operating, she whispered. This is not historical evidence. It is happening right now. Ethan looked at the screen. Can you stop it? Olivia slowly shook her head. Not yet. If we move too early, the people giving the orders will disappear before we identify them. She printed several pages before carefully disconnecting the drive. From this moment forward, she said, we trust paper more than computers. Ethan managed a faint smile. I repair machines for a living. Even I know machines can lie. Olivia smiled for the first time since they had met. It was brief, but genuine. Then her expression changed as her secure phone vibrated across the table. She glanced at the screen, and the color quietly drained from her face. The message contained only 6 words. "We know you found the witness." Olivia lowered her phone without saying another word, but Ethan had already read the answer in her expression. Whoever had sent the message knew they were together. The quiet reading room suddenly felt much smaller than it had only moments earlier. Around them, rows of aging books and municipal records remained perfectly still beneath soft yellow lamps, while the ticking of an old wall clock seemed louder than before. Ethan spoke first. "We should leave." Separately, Olivia looked at him for a moment, then slowly nodded. That would be the logical decision. She closed the folder, gathered the printed documents, and slid them into 2 separate envelopes. "Take this one," she said, handing Ethan a thin package. "It contains only transaction summaries. Nothing that identifies confidential sources." Ethan accepted it carefully. "And the rest? I will keep with me." Ethan frowned. "If someone is watching us, that makes you the easier target." Olivia allowed herself a faint smile. "That is exactly what I am counting on." They walked out through different exits. Ethan carried only the envelope inside his maintenance toolbox, while the black drive remained hidden beneath a removable compartment that had once held spare electrical connectors. Years of repairing buildings had taught him that the safest place to hide something valuable was inside something nobody considered valuable. Outside, early evening sunlight painted the city in warm shades of gold. Families hurried toward restaurants. Cyclists crossed busy intersections. Street musicians played familiar songs for passing crowds. Life continued with comforting normality, completely unaware that 2 ordinary people were quietly carrying evidence capable of changing the financial world. Ethan drove directly to Mrs. Henderson's house. Lily greeted him with blue paint covering the tips of her fingers. "Daddy, look." She proudly lifted the little birdhouse she had decorated with tiny flowers across the roof exactly as she had described the day before. Ethan smiled with genuine warmth. "That is the prettiest birdhouse I have ever seen." She laughed. "You always say that when I make something." "Because it keeps being true." For nearly an hour, Ethan forgot encrypted drives, suspicious messages, and hidden investigations. Together, they ate dinner around Mrs. Henderson's kitchen table while Lily described every detail of her school day. Ethan listened with complete attention. Olivia had been right. Guilty people protected themselves first. Fathers protected their children. As twilight settled across the neighborhood, Ethan and Lily finally returned home. Before unlocking the apartment door, Ethan paused. Nothing looked disturbed. The mailbox remained closed. The welcome mat sat exactly where Lily had left it that morning. Even so, years of maintenance work had sharpened his eye for tiny details. A narrow strip of clear tape he had quietly placed across the bottom corner of the door before leaving now hung loose. Someone had entered. Ethan forced himself to remain calm. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "why do not you wait by the truck for just a minute? I forgot to check something." Lily nodded without question. Ethan stepped inside alone. The apartment looked almost perfect. Furniture remained untouched. Family photographs still lined the shelves. The kitchen sink held the same coffee mug he had forgotten to wash. Yet several things were subtly different. One dining chair had been moved less than an inch. A cabinet door beneath the sink stood slightly crooked. His old laptop rested at a different angle than he remembered leaving it. Whoever had searched the apartment had been careful. Extremely careful. Ethan quietly inspected the toolbox hidden beneath the sink. The false compartment remained unopened. The black drive was still there. He exhaled slowly. They had searched for it. They had not found it. His phone vibrated. This time it was Olivia. "Please tell me you are not home," she said immediately. Ethan answered honestly. "I just arrived." Her silence lasted only a heartbeat. "Leave now. We intercepted internal security footage from Ashcroft. Someone used your employee file to generate a federal warrant request under your name." Ethan's expression hardened with quiet disbelief. "For what?" Olivia spoke carefully. "Financial theft. Unauthorized access to protected systems. Evidence tampering." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Every charge mirrored the events of the previous night almost perfectly, except the truth had been rearranged. He looked toward Lily waiting patiently beside the truck, still holding her painted birdhouse against her chest. She smiled the moment she saw him. Ethan smiled back, refusing to let fear reach her. Then, In the distance, two unmarked government vehicles slowly turned onto his street. The two unmarked vehicles rolled to a quiet stop halfway down the street, their headlights washing gently across the evening pavement without flashing lights or raised voices. Ethan understood immediately that whoever had organized this operation wanted everything to appear calm. Calm attracted less attention. Calm prevented neighbors from asking questions. He looked at Lily and smiled with the same reassuring warmth she had known her entire life. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "why don't you go back inside with Mrs. Henderson for a little while longer? I forgot something at work, and I need to take care of it." Lily tilted her head. "Will you still make pancakes tomorrow?" Ethan knelt beside her and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "That is a promise." She hugged him tightly before carrying her painted birdhouse back toward the warm light spilling from Mrs. Henderson's front porch. Ethan watched until the front door closed behind her. Only then did he return to his truck. His phone vibrated again. Olivia's voice arrived before he could speak. "Do not stop for anyone except me. Meet me at Pier 21. Federal agents I trust are already there." Ethan started the engine without hesitation. In the rearview mirror, the two vehicles slowly pulled away from the curb and followed at a careful distance. They never accelerated. They never crowded him. They simply remained present, patient, and deliberate. The city skyline glowed beneath the deepening blue of early evening as Ethan crossed the river toward the industrial waterfront. Cargo cranes stood motionless against the horizon like silent guardians while the scent of salt water drifted through the open window. Every traffic light seemed unusually long. Every passing vehicle seemed worthy of another glance. Yet Ethan refused to let fear dictate his decisions. He had spent years repairing complicated systems, one careful step at a time. This situation required the same discipline. At Pier 21, Olivia waited beside an unmarked government sedan with two older investigators whose expressions carried decades of experience rather than impatience. One introduced himself as Daniel Mercer. The other simply nodded before accepting the printed transaction summaries Ethan had protected inside the maintenance toolbox. Olivia looked relieved to see him. "Did anyone follow you inside?" Ethan glanced toward the entrance road. They stayed back. Mercer unfolded the documents beneath the hood of the sedan, comparing account numbers with information already stored inside his secure tablet. His calm expression slowly changed. "These transfer dates match everything we have been trying to prove for 11 months, he said quietly. Olivia removed the black drive from its hidden compartment and handed it to Mercer. "Open the executive calendar." Within moments, another series of files appeared. Private meeting schedules, internal approval chains, hidden payment authorizations. Then one document stopped everyone from speaking. It contained tomorrow night's transaction schedule together with the names of every executive required to authorize the final release. Mercer slowly removed his glasses. "They are gathering everyone in one place." Olivia nodded. "They believe the archive disappeared. They are meeting to contain the damage." Mercer immediately reached for his phone. "Notify headquarters. We move tomorrow evening, not next week." Ethan listened quietly as investigators coordinated warrants, financial freezes, digital preservation orders, and simultaneous interviews across multiple states. No shouting, no dramatic speeches. Just experienced professionals carefully fitting together pieces of a puzzle that had remained incomplete until an unnoticed maintenance worker picked up an unmarked drive from the floor. Olivia stepped beside Ethan while the others continued working. "You changed everything," she said. Ethan slowly shook his head. "I only found what someone else dropped." Olivia smiled gently. "No, hundreds of people could have walked past it. You stopped because something felt wrong." Before Ethan could answer, Mercer's secure phone rang again. He listened for several seconds without interrupting. When the call ended, he looked directly at Olivia. "The leak has been identified." Olivia exhaled quietly. "Who?" Mercer folded the phone and answered with visible disappointment. "Assistant Director Richard Hale." Silence settled across the pier. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Richard Hale had supervised the investigation from the beginning. He had approved every strategy meeting, every evidence request, and every security briefing. If Mercer was right, the person responsible for protecting the investigation had been quietly warning the organization ahead of every move. Ethan looked toward the dark water stretching beyond the harbor lights. Tomorrow night would not simply expose corrupt executives. It would reveal betrayal at the highest level of the investigation itself. The following evening arrived without sirens, without dramatic announcements, and without anyone inside Ashcroft Financial believing their carefully constructed world was about to change forever. The executive conference floor glowed beneath soft recessed lighting, while luxury cars filled the private parking garage below. Board members arrived carrying briefcases instead of suspicion. Financial officers exchanged polite greetings. Outside, ordinary employees finished another workday believing tomorrow would look exactly like today. It was a comforting illusion. From a secure operations center several blocks away, Daniel Mercer watched multiple screens displaying synchronized warrants awaiting judicial activation. Olivia Brooks stood beside him with the printed evidence Ethan had helped preserve. No one trusted digital files alone anymore. Every signature, every transaction, every approval had been verified twice. At precisely 7 o'clock, Mercer received a single confirmation from the federal judge. He nodded once. Execute. Across 4 states, financial institutions immediately froze hundreds of linked accounts. Independent auditors secured internal records. Federal investigators entered corporate offices with court-authorized documentation. No raised voices echoed through the hallways. No chaos unfolded. The people who had believed themselves untouchable simply discovered that every locked door now opened in the direction of accountability instead of secrecy. Inside the executive conference room, several senior officers stared in disbelief as payment authorization scheduled for that evening suddenly failed. One executive reached for his telephone only to discover every outside connection had already been suspended under federal authority. Calm confidence slowly gave way to quiet realization. The network they had trusted for years had disappeared within minutes. Olivia remained focused on one final responsibility. Assistant Director Richard Hale had spent months redirecting investigations, delaying warrants, and quietly warning the organization whenever investigators moved too close to the truth. When confronted with the printed evidence, he offered no dramatic defense. He simply lowered his eyes, removed his identification credentials, and accepted that every hidden decision eventually leaves a visible trail. Sometimes justice arrives loudly. Sometimes it arrives with nothing more than paper, patience, and truth. Ethan never entered the operations center during the investigation. He had already done everything anyone could reasonably ask of him. Instead, he spent the evening helping Lily finish painting tiny white flowers around the roof of her birdhouse, while Mrs. Henderson baked apple pie in the kitchen next door. His phone remained silent until nearly 9:30. When it finally rang, Olivia's voice sounded lighter than he had ever heard before. "It is over," she said quietly. Ethan looked toward Lily, who was carefully cleaning blue paint from her fingertips with a damp paper towel. "Everyone is safe?" he asked. Olivia smiled on the other end of the line. "Yes. The accounts have been frozen. The evidence has been secured. Every major participant has been identified, and your name has been completely cleared." Ethan closed his eyes for only a moment, grateful not because his own reputation had been restored, but because tomorrow Lily would walk into school carrying nothing heavier than her birdhouse. A week later, Ashcroft Financial Tower looked strangely familiar again. The fluorescent lights still hummed above polished floors. Maintenance carts still rolled quietly through long hallways. Elevators still chimed with the same mechanical precision. Ethan had returned to work because honest work had never been something he wished to escape. As he replaced another emergency light in a quiet corridor, Olivia stepped out of an elevator carrying a simple paper coffee cup instead of an evidence folder. She smiled warmly. "I thought you might have accepted another job by now." Ethan tightened the last screw before climbing down from the ladder. "Someone still has to keep the lights working." Olivia laughed softly. "You know, there are people in Washington who believe you deserve public recognition." Ethan glanced through the glass wall where the morning sun reflected across the city skyline. "The only person whose opinion matters is waiting for pancakes before school." Olivia nodded with genuine understanding. "She is lucky." Ethan shook his head gently. "No, I am." Before leaving, Olivia extended a small envelope. Inside rested nothing more than a handwritten note. "Thank you for reminding us that character matters more than status." Ethan folded the note carefully and placed it inside his wallet beside Lily's school photograph. That evening, true to his promise, Blueberry pancakes filled the apartment with the warm scent of butter and maple syrup. Lily proudly announced that her birdhouse had won first place at the science fair. Ethan applauded louder than anyone else in the room. The news channels would later spend weeks discussing frozen assets, corporate corruption, and one of the largest financial investigations in recent history. They would debate numbers, policies, and executive failures. They would never know that the story truly began with a quiet father who noticed a door that should have been closed, chose honesty when nobody was watching, and proved that the strongest people are often the ones who never ask the world to notice them at all.